Week 3 of college football has officially wrapped up, and there are a lot of things to go over. Close games, surprise upsets, and many eliminations later, we are finally beginning to build an idea of who could be the contenders for that G5 spot this year. Welcome to Groupies, a little video series where I recap all of the shenanigans that happened in the G5 world of college football, because honestly, after this week, we actually have a couple of teams that no one really expected to already be out near the front already. And if things keep going their way, there's a small chance, but a chance that they could spoil the party, maybe even grab a surprise conference championship win, and even make the playoffs. For this week, I am going to do something a little different. I'll admit I'm a little low on time, but here's the plan. There were a total of 42 games involving 56 teams that played this week. And out of those games, I'm going to be going over 10 significant games that could really shape off the playoff race. There are a couple others that I could put here, but these are the most significant ones either because they were either really close games or they had a significant shakeup in the G5 standings. So with that out of the way, let's get started. Again, these are going to be kind of in chronological order. Late Friday night, New Mexico traveled west to UCLA as the only G5 team to play that night. Now, last Friday, it wasn't too interesting, and it probably will be the same here. I mean, New Mexico is 1-1, while UCLA is 0-2, and the Bruins are favored by over 2 touchdowns. So, really, what can happen here? New Mexico, this is probably going to be their second loss of the season, right? Oh my gosh, New Mexico, what did you do to this team? Now, New Mexico quarterback Jack Lane didn't get off to the best of starts, as they played in New Mexico where he threw 2 interceptions. This night, though, he threw for 2 touchdowns and over 150 passing yards. But the real asset to this team was Damon Bankston, who produced over 200 total offensive yards and 2 touchdowns. These 2 players alone would have almost outgained UCLA in yards that night. Now, frankly, the game was close, but even the final score is a little bit deceiving, as the New Mexico defense was able to shut down UCLA way more convincingly than they could. A 14-0 lead became a 14-10 lead, but afterwards New Mexico ran away with the game. With a total of 7 deflected passes and even an interception, New Mexico was able to somehow win this game in a blowout fashion, and New Mexico would put a wonderful Big Ten win on their resume. Saturday at noon, MACtion officially kicked off for the season, with the Buffalo Bulls and the Kent State Golden Flashes. Buffalo does have an outside shot at making the MAC championship, and with Kent State, not so much. But if you see anything that they did from this game, then they are clearly an improving team. Nobody really expected this game to be close, but this is MACtion after all, and Kent State actually did give Buffalo a hard time in the first half. Drew DeShields looked great out there, and the receiving core was able to help make big plays for Kent State. Meanwhile, Buffalo was struggling offensively, including a fumble and an interception. But Buffalo certainly does have some assets, and by the end of the first half, it was a score of 14-10. Buffalo would take the lead later on, but Kent State was not willing to back down. Deep in the fourth quarter, Kent State went 93 yards in over 12 minutes to retake the lead. If the Kent State defense could hold on for the last 2.5 minutes, then they could break the longest losing streak against FBS opponents in the country. Then Taquan Robertson woke up. In just a minute and a half, he was making short gains to Aljay Henderson and longer gains to the wide receivers. And with just over a minute left, Buffalo would score. With really just one final chance, Kent State would go 4 and out, overturning it on downs. But Buffalo would do the same, which gave Kent State a chance to actually score a field goal, although they were pinned deep in their own territory. Unfortunately for them, the Buffalo defense stopped them short, and the Bulls would barely escape Dick's Stadium with a 31-28 victory. This should come as a bit of a shocking result, as Buffalo was favored by multiple touchdowns, and yet they just barely outgained Kent State in yards. Both teams certainly held their own here. Expect the Golden Flashes to get some wins this season. As for Buffalo, even with the strength of the MAC this year, it will be a long road ahead of them for this season if they could actually contend for the MAC championship. Okay, it's the 1-1 Yukon Huskies taking on the 1-1 Delaware Blue Hens. Let's see how this game plays out. That loss against Syracuse definitely stunned, but Yukon definitely has the team to make a win happen here. Delaware is still looking for their first FBS opponent win. Well, this game turned into a shootout. A touchdown for Delaware, a field goal for Yukon here, a touchdown here, a touchdown there, and by the end of the half, it was 28-24 in favor of Delaware. Both offenses are on their A game tonight, and by the end of the game, both of them would have produced over 500 yards. UConn would retake the lead in the middle of the third, but Delaware in about 5 minutes went down the field again to score their next touchdown, the fourth lead change in the game. The Huskies would quickly score again, and when Delaware missed a field goal, it seemed like it was all in UConn's hands. With about 7 minutes to go, UConn would drive it down the field for 5 minutes, but eventually got stuck with a brick wall deep in Delaware territory. It would be the first time Fagnano and the UConn offense got turned over on downs the entire game. Delaware's final drive did not start off well, but eventually the Delaware quarterback was able to find some rhythm, and as time expired, Nate Reed kicked the game-tying field goal. In overtime, 5 yards away from the end zone, UConn got held to a field goal. When it was Delaware's turn, Nick Minicucci delivered, claiming Delaware's first ever win over an FBS opponent. Okay, we got undefeated Washington State versus undefeated North Texas. I know Washington State had a scare against Idaho a while ago, but they should be improved now, and maybe it will be a close game. Oh my gosh, North Texas, what did you do to this team? The North Texas quarterback, Drew Mestamaker, threw for 4 touchdowns. Washington State did not get a single touchdown from their quarterbacks. I watched the entire first half of this game, and I can tell you right now that this score could not have been any further away. But the final score is deceiving as well. Despite having 31 minutes of possession time, the amount of turnovers they had prevented them from ever getting near the end zone. In fact, they only reached the end zone once. The Mean Green beat up Washington State so bad that the game was practically over by the time the first half ended. No matter what, with such a dominant win, if North Texas could keep up this momentum coming into conference play, then we might have a surprise contender for not only the American Conference, but for the playoffs as well. I'm going to give an honorable mention to ranked South Florida playing Miami because while the game was expected to be something, ultimately Miami was just too much for them. Considering South Florida has played 3 ranked teams in a row now, and this is only their first loss, and it's out of conference, means it's not going to hurt them too bad in the long run. Miami was simply the better team here. If I have to take away something from South Florida's performance that day, and it's that their rushing offense got completely stopped. They got locked down big time. Although Nimrod did pretty well as a wide receiver. Okay, so this game is going to be a bit of a rough one to go through. So, first quarter is just a punting battle, but in the second quarter on Nevada's first drive, Chubba Purdy passed it to Kai Woods for the first touchdown of the game. Middle Tennessee would then miss a field goal, which started a lot of offensive misery for them in the second quarter, leading Nevada to go up 13-0 at the half. The struggles continued into the third quarter, now mainly affecting Nevada, and by the time it was the fourth quarter, it looked like Nevada would have had this game won. AJ Bianco was playing for Nevada at the time, but they switched back to Chubba Purdy for this quarter. With 6.5 minutes to go, Middle Tennessee quarterback Nicholas Vattiato did a touchdown pass to finally get them on the board. Now it is time for Nevada to seal the game. A 4-minute drive later, and a missed field goal. With around 2 minutes to go, Nicholas Vattiato led the Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders down again to the end zone off of consistent passes, and they eventually found their way into the end zone for only the second time. That was enough for them to take a lead, and now Nevada needed a crucial score. With around 20 seconds to go, Chubba Purdy was able to get them in field goal range, but on a 40-plus yard field goal, they could ultimately not convert the score. Middle Tennessee claims their first win of the season with a 14-13 score. While not one of the biggest consequential matchups, it certainly was one of the more shocking, considering Nevada might as well have the game won in the fourth. But that's why 4 quarters are played, and for that entire quarter, Vattiato showed up. The first Sunbelt showdown of the year comes between Appalachian State and Southern Miss. This is going to be a pretty underrated matchup, and AJ Swan intercepted the ball on the first drive. Okay. They did make up for it, though, and Appalachian State is up 7-0. Never mind, it's going to be 7-all. Southern Miss also scores. In the second quarter, Southern Miss is now up 10-7, and Appalachian State is about to complete another pretty short drive to the end zone, and then this play happens.
And that's exactly what an offense wants.
William fouls in motion. A.J. Swan going to swing it to Rashad DeBinion. That is intercepted into the hands of Ian Foster. A defensive score for the Golden Eagles.
A.J. Swan would record his third interception right afterwards, prompting Appalachian State to bench him and bring in the backups. And that's when the game practically got away from them. While Braylon Braxton wasn't perfect, he, and especially the Southern Miss defense, including Jamon Tapp and Ian Foster, who was the one that did the interception touchdown, rolled the Mountaineers. Behind Braxton's 279 yards and outrushing Appalachian State, Southern Miss would win this game convincingly 38-22. Not only did the Golden Eagles double their win total from last year, but they now have a massive significant win, considering Appalachian State was one of the favorites in the Sun Belt East, and will be riding on that momentum to see what they could actually do in the Sun Belt Conference. Alright, here's kind of a big game. We got Jacksonville State, they're just 1-1, but Georgia Southern needs a course correction game. The game is high scoring immediately, with Georgia Southern having the slightest advantage. This trend would continue for about a quarter and a half, but Jacksonville State started responding, and by the end of the first half, it was only a 7-point game. The lead was never too big between these two schools, but there's clearly some high-powered offense happening. Both offenses were putting out as much production as they possibly could, and at this point, it would be down to a game of defense. The second half did not start off well for Jacksonville State, mainly thanks to a 5-yard penalty near the end zone, but they recovered a field goal out of it. Now at a 4-point game, it's down to Georgia Southern to extend the lead. They were having some struggles of their own, and after back-to-back 3-and-outs, they fumbled the ball in midfield. Jacksonville State would take the lead. In the fourth quarter, Georgia Southern would have the ball, and particularly J.C. French IV and O.J. Arnold would start moving it down the field. They would kick a field goal, which would make it 34-all. After Jacksonville State punted the ball, O.J. Arnold and Weston Bryan would be able to rush it down the field for another touchdown, and this time they would retake the lead for good. After trying to run down as much clock as possible, Jacksonville State ultimately got pinned in their own territory and had to punt, which allowed Georgia Southern to run down all the clock and win the game. The game's so close, it didn't help that Gavin Wimsatt threw an interception, which was the only one of the game, but overall, he did well. Same goes for Cam Cook. Rhett Steiner also was a contributing wide receiver as well. On the Georgia Southern side, it was your usual suspects, but it was also wide receiver Dalen Cobb. Overall, it was a close game, with Georgia Southern getting their first win and knocking Jacksonville State out of the playoff race. Old Dominion was expected to keep it close against their in-state opponent Virginia Tech, but with the Hokies down 0-2, you would expect them to play at their very best. Well, one team did show up, and it just happened to be Old Dominion. Colton Josephs is just a sophomore quarterback, but throughout the early parts of the season, he has been slowly improving himself, and he certainly proved himself here too, with 276 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Traquan Jones would also record his second consecutive game with both over 100 rushing yards and a touchdown. So how did Virginia Tech do? Well, their quarterback ended up scoring 3 touchdowns and 1 interception, and he also got another touchdown running on the ground. So, was it a close game? Here's the problem. 6 people on their team contributed to a touchdown. These types of diverse plays happening among the Monarchs players made it so that it seemed like Old Dominion would run away with this game. And that's kind of the reason there's not too much to talk about. It's because they did. Yeah, they had a fumble in the first quarter, but that was their only turnover all day. With the help of the players I mentioned, including wide receivers Thomas and Abdul Rahim Gladding, Old Dominion destroyed them. At one point, it was 31-0 in the third quarter. The final score was 45-26, but don't let that fool you. Old Dominion has recorded only 2 wins against Power 5 opponents since moving up in 2014. That was prior to this game. This was the first time they beat Virginia Tech in their home stadium too. And you want to guess what those other 2 wins against Power 5 opponents were? Virginia Tech. These 2 teams have met up the first time in 2017 and has played 7 total matches so far. Old Dominion has 3 of those wins. This is practically an in-state rivalry. If y'all have any names for this, let me know. This was also the first time Old Dominion won by more than 2 touchdowns. And so, Brent Pry was shown the door at Virginia Tech. Deshaun Foster at UCLA was also shown the door as well, presumably after their loss to New Mexico. Regardless though of shaking things up, this win was big for Old Dominion, and for now, it practically launched them into being a dark horse contender for the Sun Belt. We'll see if they can keep that momentum up when they have to face Liberty in 2 weeks. In the evening hours of Saturday, the Tulane Green Wave at 2-0 are going to be hosting Duke. With South Florida's loss earlier that day, this could be a real chance for the Green Wave to potentially get a good win on their resume. Jake Retzlaff was already getting some significant attention, but this game is where he really proved his strengths. He threw for nearly 250 yards, yes, but his big impact came on the ground with over 100 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns, a new program record. He was excellent all day, and it showed on the field, and just in the first quarter, Tulane was up 14-0. Duke would eventually be able to get things together, but this was after multiple turnovers, and by the end of the first half, Tulane had built a significant lead. Despite Retzlaff's efforts, there was some struggle in the game, and because of this, it started allowing Duke back into the game. They were making way more opportunities into the fourth quarter, and they were able to score 10 points in that. But it wasn't enough to beat Tulane as they lost by 7. This was a massive win for the Green Wave, and while it moves them up to 3-0, it does raise some question. Building a 3-touchdown lead only to win by 1 does raise some questions of what they could actually do in a closer game. But on the other hand, beating a power opponent at least makes you the second best team in the G5 race. It is clear that some work has to be done here, but as the favorite to win the American, I'm sure they should have no problem and will be able to adjust by the time conference play begins. Finally, the last game of this review is kind of an unexpected one. The 0-2 Akron Zips versus the 1-1 UAB Blazers. UAB had yet to start 2-1 since 2022, which was also the last year they went to a bowl game. With everything happening at Akron, there's only really thing they're fighting for, and it's just pride. But a couple of wins would definitely help in the foreseeable future. To their credit, the Zips did not make it easy for the Blazers, as it was a shootout in the first and halfway through the second quarter. The quarterbacks of Ben Finley and Jalen Kitna were balling out. By the end of this game, they would both have 2 touchdowns each. Things did begin to go wrong for Akron, however, and UAB was able to build up some lead by the end of the first half. The game slowed to a crawl in the second half, with plenty of missed opportunities, but also not being able to move the ball at all really. A 5-minute drive in the fourth did give Akron a touchdown, which ended up making it a 3-point game. With about a minute and a half to go, they were practically gifted a chance to go down the field and at least score a game-tying field goal. Whether the UAB defense locked up or Ben Finley couldn't get anything going, it was a disastrous drive. They were pinned deep in their own territory and started off with a 15-yard reception to Miles Walker, but afterwards it was completion and a good sack, and with a couple more completions, it was a turnover on downs. While Akron had not formally turned the ball over, something UAB couldn't say, that was their second turnover on downs, and that was enough for the UAB Blazers to escape with a win. I kind of see a game like this as a repeat of the Kent State and Buffalo game. Even if it was a tough loss on the road and it was kind of close, it's still not a great performance by them. But UAB definitely did their best as well. The receiving core definitely benefited them, and they were able to keep their honor and move up to 2-1. That is it for the recap of Week 3. Thank you all for watching, everyone. I hope you don't mind the new format. Maybe it'll be temporary, maybe not. Let's get into the weekly standings and the eliminations as well, shall we? Last week, I mentioned that there were 50 teams remaining, and today, 12 of them were eliminated. This brings us to our final 38, and those teams will be revealed right now. The American has 4 3-0 teams, but technically Navy is in the lead thanks to 2 conference wins. The other teams are Memphis, North Texas, and Tulane, with some contenders such as South Florida, and maybe whoever else has only 1 loss. The only team from here to be eliminated this week? Florida Atlantic. Conference USA is already a mess, with Louisiana Tech and Western Kentucky being tied for first. Trust me, it is not gonna get any more comprehensible from here. While Jacksonville State and UTEP were eliminated this time around, don't think that there's no people that are actually out of contention to win this conference. Buffalo's win against Kent State means that they are the only team to win a conference game, but there are still some 2-1 teams such as Bowling Green and Toledo. This playing field will get more equal as all the teams start to do conference play, and at this point, it really is going to be a toss-up. There are a lot of teams that have yet to register a win now, and the teams eliminated this time around were Ohio and Central Michigan. Nevada is the second team eliminated from the Mountain West after going 1-2, but the UNLV Rebels is the only undefeated team also. There are some teams that only have 1 loss like Utah State, Wyoming, Boise State, and whatnot, but they all need to win the rest of their games likely, especially in a competitive conference like this, in order to actually contend for that G5 playoff spot. Washington State falls to 2-1 after being beaten badly by North Texas, while UConn gets eliminated. And finally, for the Sun Belt, Old Dominion's huge win against Virginia Tech makes them the best team in the East. Meanwhile, Southern Miss's win against Appalachian State puts them technically as the best team in the West. It is still going to be tough to determine which teams might make the Sun Belt Championship this year, but there are some contenders such as James Madison, Appalachian State, and Texas State. This conference also saw the most casualties this week, including Coastal Carolina, Arkansas State, Louisiana, South Alabama, and Troy. Out of the teams in danger, Tulsa, Liberty, and Kent State are the only 1 and 2 teams that are still in it, and there's a whole bunch of teams afterwards where 1 loss would end their bid immediately. That's kind of the joy of out-of-conference play. Not only do any of these G5 teams have a chance to upset their power opponents and potentially cause a lot of chaos, but there's a lot of teams, unfortunately, that get filtered out. Nonetheless, it does create the narratives that we see as we venture into conference play. That is when the real beauty of groupies begins. With our final 38 teams, thank you all for watching, everybody, and I will see you all next week.